Greetings and welcome to the Liberty Show, where we talk about American classical education and our aim to form knowledgeable, virtuous citizens. We're building a network of K-12 American classical charter schools that emphasize virtuous living, traditional learning, and civic responsibility. My name is Matthew Kirby. I'm the CEO of Liberty Classical Schools, and I'll be your host. Let me tell you just a little bit about Liberty. Our ambition is to form 10 schools in 10 years. We've got 2 up and operating today, Atlanta Classical Academy, as well as Northwest Classical Academy, which is in Kennesaw, Georgia, about 25 minutes north and west of Atlanta. We'll be opening our 3rd school, Cherokee Classical Academy, in just a couple of weeks here in August of 2025. Our ambition is to grow this network so that we're serving about 9,000 students, producing hundreds of citizen leaders every single year. You can read more about us at libertyclassicalschools.org. And today, I'm excited to welcome a very special guest, my good friend, Leo Smith. Welcome, Leo.
Thank you, Matthew.
I'm going to give him a little bit of an introduction here at the outset, but Leo has an incredible story. His life story is amazing. His service to our organizations has been incredible. And so let me just kind of start with that. Leo, I think I've been thinking about it that probably other than Cat McAfee, you're the longest standing. You have more board member years in our schools than anybody else. You were kind enough to join the board of Atlanta Classical Academy, I don't even know, 8-10 years ago, something like that. And then you've done multiple stints on that board. That you also joined the founding board of Northwest Classical Academy, where you helped us get that school launched. It's now in its 5th year. You've rolled off the board there, and you just finished your last term of service with ACA. So I want to start by just thanking you for your time, your energy, your service. And maybe we could start, I want to circle back and get to your background and get you to tell everybody your story. But let's start with, what was it that appealed to you about Atlanta Classical Academy when we talked about this so many years ago? You know, what caused you to join us?
Well, as you know, Matthew, my current work is in political and policy advocacy. And before that, though, when I first arrived to Atlanta, my work was as an entrepreneur and a businessman, starting up health and fitness centers as a way of supporting my family and living the dream of moral capitalism that produced results that corresponded with my commitment to things like social justice and advancement, free market ideology, and ways to uplift and empower people into a dignified human existence. So that's been part of who I have been pretty much even before I arrived to Atlanta back in 2002. I was picked up sort of by a movement to address whether or not America, coming from an industrialization, impact on education, manuscript, getting factory workers, et cetera. And I was writing a lot about in publishing in local newspapers, local feeds, online magazines, et cetera. I was writing a lot about what I was experiencing as an employer when it came to the talent of those who had graduated high school and college and were working for me in the health club. And I saw some lacking there. I saw some people who were struggling to engage with others. I saw people who really didn't have the critical thinking skills to extrapolate into a sense of ownership, because I wanted every one of my employees to have a feeling that they owned the health club so that they could operate like an owner, have more invested in that stake in the matter. And they were having trouble interpolating that. And so I figured, as someone, and we can talk about even going further back, I had an education background that I brought to my entrepreneurship in the business world. And as someone who had been in education and provided education to a lot of other people, I said, boy, something's going on in Georgia. And that's when I started writing a lot. Heritage Foundation actually picked up on a couple of articles that I had written about the importance of education and it being the civil rights issue of this decade, this century. And so then I began to get involved with Foundation for Economic Education. Larry Reed, then the president. This was more of a libertarian type think tank that was talking about economics and education, the intermix of them. And certainly I was being impacted as a business person by that lacking. I began to think a lot about workforce development and Georgia's competitiveness. And this was during the time in which Governor Deal was in office. So I began to talk to Governor Deal about education and got involved heavily in political work, became a strategist for the Republican National Committee really pushing education. Helped with this formed group that the Koch brothers, which George Pacific folks, Larry Reed with Fee, connected me with them. Got hired in the formulation of something called the Brighter Georgia Education Coalition, which were the people who developed the legislation and the advocacy campaign for legislation for the charter school amendment in Georgia.
Yeah.
So I was right there at the beginning of formulating those ideas, pushing out the campaign across the state. I traveled 159 counties to push that. At the same time, I was moving towards working with the Republican National Committee. It all blended together. And, politically, there was nobody in favor. We won't talk a lot about partisanship, but there was no party in favor of public charter schools at the time.
Right.
But for me, it was imperative, not just morally, but even from a business perspective. If you believe in the power and the ability of capitalism to do good, yes, we had to have a type of education that produced a really great workforce. But we also had to have a workforce that combined intellect and character, as Martin Luther King would say in 1947 in his Maroon Tiger article at Morehouse College. So we remember these great thinkers from Plato in 427 BCE, saying that what we should look for in a leader, they would ask Plato, and Plato would say someone who seeks wisdom, right? And so here you came, and I'm not letting you ask a lot of questions here because the story just flows. I could go back into my early child development.
We'll go back to that.
This adult stuff with you, this adulting stuff, you and I were dads.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that you and I agreed that a moral education is important as it relates to creating a virtuous citizen.
That's right.
And so that's how when the high school, which was an evangelical Christian school, you and I both had our children there at a young formative age, preschool and first and second grade. And when that school closed down, we had two paths. I held meetings in that gym, which is now ACA's, Atlanta Classical Academy's gym.
That's right.
And I had meetings with a group of people, and you were interested in that too, who were focused on what can we do to keep this religious and moral education, which was the priority of that school. It was a private school, so it was appropriate for it to be religious education that really focused on citizenship, great books, even then.
That's right.
But a good businessman with understanding of the Atlanta market and the families around involved, the nuance of it all, Matthew Kirby was like, Leo, that path is, an interesting path, and that's that we understand the motive of that, but we might want to put some eggs on the basket of taking advantage of this charter school movement. Yeah. And since I was already working in the industry, I was happy to, help sort of guide some of that. And as you formed your first advisory group, I remember, those meetings we had right from the start. And then to knock down some of the blocks against it that we experienced with, some of the people that we had to win over. And since I was involved in politics, to be able to bring some of that to a manifestation. So this whole melding from entrepreneurship to understanding the importance of building a great society that can be resilient into the future, and make sure that people got education opportunity that is fit for the kid and the family and the skills and aptitude of the child. That all came together with your vision and your support and the people that you put together to make Atlanta Classical's charter petition as a statewide charter a reality. Yeah. And of course I was committed to that because I just didn't really want to pay for private school for my children.
Well, there was that too.
That's right.
That is interesting. You and I lived together through all that. It was an interesting time in Atlanta, in North Atlanta. There were hundreds of families impacted by the closing of the high school. As it turns out, I was already down the road with developing the business plan for Atlanta Classical Academy at that moment.
Doesn't surprise me, Matthew.
We were a couple of years into that, and had a lot in place to get the school open with one major challenge, which is that we didn't have a building. We didn't have anywhere to go.
See, Matthew, I want to ask you. So I want to ask you because that's quite something.
Yeah.
So as my head was down trying to figure out how do we save the high school, you remember I actually worked for them. I
remember.
Right. So you were Your visionary leadership, you were already well ahead. I didn't know.
Maybe it was providential, maybe it was just good luck, but yeah, I had started, and I won't tell the entire genesis story of Atlanta Classical Academy, but was coaching football at North Atlanta High School as a volunteer. Was drawn into the idea of perhaps creating a charter school on the north side of Atlanta that would serve all students in Atlanta. We had developed the business plan. We had hired the leader. We had done the enrollment process and lottery. We had 486 kids enrolled. We had 1,000 on a wait list. We were starting to hire people, but we did not have a location. And it was in the spring of 2014, you may recall, we got a letter home from the high school saying that after 50 plus years of service, the school was closing.
Right.
And it was like, that's amazing. Now there is suddenly going to be a building available right here in our community. So that is Atlanta Classical's story. It's not terribly unlike the story of many charter schools that sort of get all those political approvals, do all that hard work, and are struggling to solve the facilities challenge. So that's not unique to us, but it was particularly exciting. And anyway, I remember, you and I were friends before that. As you said, we had young kids in the school. That was a hard time for a lot of people. It did break up a school community, like it really did. There, we have friends. I have friends to this day that our friendships inadvertently sort of diverged as a result of that school closing. Some of them, many of them, attempted to get into Atlanta Classical Academy. Obviously, we're a public school, and we have very we have kind of tightly regulated in how we do enrollment. And anyway, so I just remember our friendship. I remember you took a lot of leadership in that, and I feel like I kind of got to know you during that era, and that's probably what caused me the way you handled yourself and handled all that. It just drew me to you, and I could see your passion for education, your entrepreneurship as a business leader was very appealing. And we have kids the same age, roughly the same age, which kind of put us in that same stage and walk of life. So. Yeah, you're obviously a guy that's really interested in the combination, as you've already said, the combination of the economy, business, a thriving culture, a thriving city, thriving nation, but also that connection to education. I don't want to miss the point that just to celebrate your own fatherhood. Like I want to just say publicly, like I think, you've raised two incredible kids, and I'll let you decide if you want to share detail on that, but you've got a son and a daughter, one in college, one in just at the tail end of high school here, absolutely crushing it in the world, and you guys should be incredibly proud of that. I think you'd be a good model for a lot of people to look at. They should be asking, how did you do that exactly? Well, maybe I'll ask you that. Like, what do you think has sort of been the key, the essence of your success as a father and of raising two kids who are incredibly well-adjusted and smart and kind of really moving into the future with a lot of success? What's been the key, you think?
Well, the one key is that I chose well and who I would have offspring with as a wife and to being equally yoked and sort of having the same sort of philosophy that to do anything in this world is to have a sense of purpose. And so whether you are a single person, whether you are a single parent, but purpose ought to be why you exist and why your child exists. And for my wife and I at the time, we were committed to the idea that a child, a family, is for purposeful use by God to be fruitful and to give benefit, to make the earth more salty, so to speak. And not to get into all the rhetoric that sounds maybe even biblical, but this stuff is just functional. So as a person who has a background in psychology and engineering together, I tend to think in a very, very systemic way. Unfortunately, I don't want to sound like a mad scientist, but like the great applied behaviorist Watson, you have a responsibility to create an ecosystem for the child that you create that maximizes their potential, maximizes their options. So I always felt like our children, if we had them, and then we did have our first child and our second child, that we were to to train them up in the way that, they should go as though they belong to the world, to God and the world for a higher purpose. And so our job was to get them ready to maximize their purposes. Yeah. And in doing that and creating a family ethos, putting that ethos up on the wall for parents who hadn't sat down and say, what's our family creed? Can we put it in a frame and put it on the wall that we don't waste talents? That's one of the things. If God gives us a talent, if my child has a talent, we will maximize that talent as though we owe that to God. And so, but as though you owe that to society, to the goodness of society, so that that person can thrive and be resilient and be useful and find their purpose in life. Yeah. So we had a commitment to that. And what that meant was, first, is that understanding that education is like slow brain surgery.
Yeah.
Okay. And if anybody was going to get brain surgery, they would think very carefully about the neuroscientists and that leads to that brain surgery, the scientists themselves and the skill that they might have in the operation room. They wouldn't just hand over their brain to anybody without any critique. Same should be for education. Yeah. And I guarantee you, and I know everybody would agree, that we don't provide the same sort of discernment and carefulness about a child's education as we do brain surgery. Yeah. But yet, a brain is being shaped by every moment sitting in a classroom.
That's right.
And so we made a commitment that we would sacrifice. That meant less golf for me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It meant that I drove a Ford Chevrolet or a Ford at an entry level rather than, driving a fancy Maserati or something like that. Right. It meant the smaller home. It meant that there were career opportunities that I didn't pursue because it would make my family suffer. Yeah. The time with the children, the time discussing their educational achievement, the time at the kitchen table with flashcards, all of that is a family thing. Attending parent meetings, all that. It was a privilege. Now, I had earned the ability to have that kind of focus. Not everybody is blessed to be able to spend that much time with their children. I can remember oftentimes being the only dad at a school event. At high school, we had a dad's group, so we had that group. But then at the other school that my kids matriculated to after high school closed, same thing, but more just women at that table. Right. So part of the secret sauce is that both parents, whenever possible, should try and commit as much as possible to their children's development, even if it means sacrificing a little bit of your professional career. Yeah. Because you will benefit in the end. Yeah. That they will be off and thriving. One daughter's, was D1 recruit, highly sought after for both academics and athletics at the University of Southern California. Her, up there training with Olympians, her roommate's an Olympian, et cetera. But because she's so skilled and because she's developed herself academically so well, in her first year, D1 athletics, 3.8 GPA at University of Southern Cal. Amazing. And, of course, she was attractive to this new portal that athletics have. So because of her academic as well as her athletic ability, she has market viability that gives her choices. Yeah. So now she's off in Kenya doing missionary work and service to Kenya while still now maintaining a full scholarship athletically and NIL deals at University of Virginia because of this fundamental work that we did from the womb to the classroom. This is a commitment we can make as parents, Matthew, and if we make that sacrifice, it may be hard, but the hard travel is onto basically creating many paths for your children to choose from. And my son, same thing. He's a student at at Westminster School here. Mm-hmm. He's an athlete as well. He's a rising senior, so he'll be a senior this coming fall. And again, he's being sought after by many universities, both Ivy and traditional.
Yes, great schools.
He's got a lot of great options for himself. Excellent student. I won't say what he got on his ACT score, but he strives for perfection.
There you go.
But high school, all of that fit into it, the discipline, our commitment. And now, hopefully, they'll take care of Daddy when he's older.
There you go. Well, I'm sure they will. Well, like I said, I think that's something you really should be proud of, and your intentionality is going to be rewarded and paid off in time. So that's really something. Well, let's kind of shift gears a little bit. We, as you know, serve lots of different constituents in these public charter schools. We've got to attract families and kids. We've got to attract employees. We've got to attract board members. We've got to be attractive to government officials, to donors. The whole gambit. Maybe let's kind of focus in a little bit on parents. So just if you were to talk to a young family that was considering education, and maybe Atlanta Classical was one of the options they're considering, what do you think were some of the highlights? What are the reasons to go to Atlanta Classical based on your kind of tenure as a board member, observing how we've changed and grown and developed over time, and based on our mission, curriculum, all that? What's attractive about it?
The beautiful thing about my experience with ACA, Atlanta Classical, it was born out of a community need.
Yeah.
And some of that community were close personal friends of mine. So I've had the privilege of having families continue with ACA that I'd been involved with in general life before ACA was created. And I've had a few close family members even work at ACA, and their children attend ACA as well. It meets a need. And so for the families, as a family considers what is the future that we want for ourselves and for our children, having educational choice, not because educational choice is a buzzword, because it's a practicality. Not all kids and families are built the same. And so in a market, if I can choose in the morning whether I want Chick-fil-A or Smoothie King or whatever, I got choices on how I give myself nutrition. Well, likewise, it makes sense that if I have to choose my slow brain surgery, my education vessels, then I should have choices in that. And parents deserve that. Children deserve that matching of interests. And so a school like ACA, smaller classrooms, more engagement, more intention. One of the things I like about ACA, and we think about how small we've been. What do? We graduated our first senior class in 2019. What was it, 40 students maybe?
About that. Yeah.
So I think about that as the whole idea of what's, in politics that I work in, what's the ideal focus group? Well, 7 to 12 people. We don't want a focus group of 100 people because that's hard to manage. It's hard to get everybody engaged. And we can see in today's society that people struggle with engaging.
Yeah, that's right.
That the ability to civilly mingle and to engage and to relate to others, that's a skill that hasn't been developed. And the way you develop that skill is at a school like ACA that not only creates the right ecosystem, the smaller classrooms, the teachers who believe in rhetorical engagement, critical thinking skill engagement, and to watch for the development of character as it relates to developing virtuous students, that's really important for a family. So can you imagine when you send your kid off to a school like ACA and they're learning skills, and then they come home one evening and you and your partner, your spouse, are dealing with a complicated issue, maybe it's budget or finance, and someone is saying, well, you should do this and you should do that. And the child, having learned from ACA, says, we deserve to give each other more grace. Why don't you listen to his side and then you can listen to his side? And those are the skills. And that I've had families from ACA tell me that their kids have taught them like that.
Wow. Yeah.
And that is extremely powerful and life-changing for families. And it really creates a commitment. My only regret about a school like Atlanta Classical Academy, schools like Northwest Classical, is that we have probably 1,500 waiting lists for ACA, maybe more.
More than that. Yeah,
right. That there's a demand out there that we can't do more education like that. But I also want to pull something that one of our former presidents, Barack Obama, talked about, and he talked about. I might not have, we may not always agree on the process or what's motivating it, but there's this idea about the interchange and intermingling people from different backgrounds, perspectives, economic levels, economic histories, educational histories, and how that rubbing against other people who have lived life in a different way with different perspectives, et cetera, rises the tides of all boats.
That's right.
Atlanta Classical is an example of that.
Yeah.
We took advantage of legislation in your good vision that allowed the creation of a school in a fairly privileged community of Buckhead. But because of the statewide charter option, something that that's important to me, taking people who are normally marginalized away from, because of economic reasons, whatever, the best opportunities in life, the charter school amendment allowed us to petition in a way that we could pull kids from all over Atlanta public school system.
That's right. That's right.
Which meant that some poor kids who did not live in the Buckhead community can now go to school with kids who grandparents had PhDs.
Right.
Who could afford private tutors, who when they needed a college counselor, they didn't use the school college counselor. They hired private college counselors for $10,000 a pop.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you still may not, if you're in that school at ACA, you still may not be able to afford those things, but you can learn from those who have afforded those things. And that is why we saw a shrinking gap, learning achievement gap between those who have and those who have not at ACA. So that mix in that school really created like new ceilings. And I don't even want to say that the ceiling is. I want to say that that mix at Atlanta Classical created an unlimited hemisphere for learning and opportunity by experiencing the realities of others. And it humbles those who are high because of financial advantages. And it shows new opportunity that aren't always financially associated, but sometimes can just be a cultural commitment even.
Yeah, that's right.
And you and Atlanta Classical and our great board members have had a commitment to not just shaping education for its block and tackle, but by saying there is an acceptance of a certain cultural reality that we have to say we have to create the culture that allows learning and that makes sure that learning the true and doing the good and loving the beautiful is our priority. That's our trinity, right?
That's right. That's right.
So a culture of that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what parents can get from Atlanta Classical. That's what we are trying to imbue into the placement of Northwest Classical and any other school. This is important because we see in this society, and one of the things I focused on as a board member, each board member brings their own assets, capacity, skills, experience, professionalism to the table. Some are excellent at finance. Some are excellent at risk management and legal advice. Mine was government relations.
Yeah, that's right.
And so my focus was making sure in a time of all this political division that we were also helping legislators know that there's a better way to educate our students.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Well, you've definitely highlighted some areas or aspects of our movement and of our school that is intentional and is something I'm really proud of. I mean, you're right. Atlanta serves kids from 27 different zip codes. We work hard to make the schools accessible as we can to as many as we can. We invest in transportation and other measures to try to bring that to fruition. We do have close to 2,000 on a wait list. If I could brag a little bit more, we know that our economically disadvantaged students actually perform as students that are not economically disadvantaged in other parts of the district. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but it's working, and I think that is actually a really excellent aspect of things. Well, let me ask you a little bit about your future. How are you? You've given us a lot of time over the years. You're going to get a little bit of it back, and I know you're going to fill it with other great things. Are there other things on your horizon that you're particularly excited about that you'd want to share?
Well, I explained to someone this morning who was asking me to come serve on their board that 2 years ago I was on 11 boards.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And now that my children are both to have both in college, I started to think about, okay, it's time to return to being a good entrepreneur and being a good capitalist.
There you go.
Because I think capitalism is taking a little beating right now. And I think that we can do good moral capitalism in a way that improves society, creates cooperation and collaboration, and holds the thing that gives us a differential advantage as a human society, and that is building the dignity of work. So I'm going to be spending a lot more time about how do we create ecosystems that allow competitiveness, innovation, and working more with some of the leaders and scholars that I work with as a member of the Leadership Network for American Enterprise Institute, a think tank that we've been able to benefit at ACA from those relationships, to really kind of maximize that at a time such as this, where there's so much divisiveness and division and political rhetoric for the sake of opposition. I want to peel away at that a little bit and start to find where is the fabric that we can hold together, that an American advantage, so to speak, but largely a humanitarian advantage that shows that people who do good and trade with one another can do better at it if we're also virtuous and moral. So I will not be leaving sort of education as I move on. I'm going to be looking for ways to be involved as a leader and influencer of funding of education. So I'll have some announcements soon about some of the organizations that I'll be joining in order to give birth to more opportunities like we provided at Atlanta Classical. And at the same time, I'll go back to recouping my personal economy by getting involved in some business stuff that I've set on the sidelines and getting more involved in those things. And other than that, I want to play golf again and grow a garden again. And
well, call me. We'll play sometime. Can we do
that? Absolutely. We'll play. Especially now while I got an excuse. I haven't played in 20 years, so I always have that excuse on every tee box.
All right. You mentioned earlier that you're gonna start ramping up a little bit of production. Are there places that you'd like people to look you up? Do you have any social media handles out there, anything you want to share?
Yeah. So I will continue to use, it got hijacked once by a political opposition team, but I have a Instagram account called Leo Smith Politics.
Okay.
I will continue to use that. I'm going to start ramping up more content on that. My team and we discussed yesterday that, though I'm sort of anti-social media in a lot of ways for a lot of reasons I think you and I would agree on. However, this influence market that we have, I always say sometimes evil jumps in where goodness fears to tread. Well, if you have something that is true and good and beautiful, and things like educational precepts that are tried and true over the annals of time, and that information isn't getting out there so that people can know there's a better way, you got to get it out there. So I'm even going to open up a TikTok account soon.
Wow, there you go. Well, we got to tell people what to think about us.
We've got to
on some level. That's right.
Right. Because I've learned from my children that it is a source of information that even kids who are well-educated, critical thinkers, et cetera, even they use it. Yeah. And so that's an area of social media development. I'm also working on a school sports safety campaign.
Okay.
And so we're looking at how can we get more out of athletes, and this group is called Future MVP. So how much market competitiveness do we lose in the sports industry because of injuries that could be avoided? Yeah. How many families are suffering because they didn't know how to check on the health of that sprain or arm injury, and a student's life is disrupted because of sports? Because we're growing into a more and more sports-minded community, and sports is a commodity. Yeah. And so as we combine things like AI with sports, et cetera, AI can make a lot of quick decisions. It can make a lot of efficient decisions, and athletes are using AI even for training. But are they doing the right things?
Yeah.
Are the things that AI is advising, is it moral? So that's where, even the technology and sports and where we are politically, all of this still begs the question, all right, who's going to make sure that we're pursuing leaders with wisdoms, athletes with wisdom, athletes who can make community better rather than just entertain us? I think back to Marcus Aurelius, right? It's like, are you yet entertained? Well, clearly Americans are entertained, but are we good?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Well, Leo, I want to thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today. As I may have mentioned at the top end of all this, we're trying to use this podcast to really elevate our mission of forming knowledgeable, virtuous citizens, and to kind of bring into light the people, the ideas that are driving this movement. And I just want to express again gratitude to you. I think that you're a fabulous father, a fabulous role model for many men in the community who could look at you and ask questions of, man, how did this guy raise kids who are just so strong and thriving in the world? I want to thank you for your board service to Atlanta Classical Academy, to Northwest Classical Academy, for your work in political advocacy. You've done a lot, not just for our group of schools, but really for charter schools in general in Georgia. And most of all, though, I just appreciate your friendship, and I know that's going to continue in the future. So I want to thank you again for being with us today.
Likewise, Matthew, I've always appreciated your commitment to your family, but your sacrifice for all families, because certainly you made that, and the world is better for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, folks, we're going to wrap it up here. Appreciate you joining us for the Liberty Show. Again, you can read more about us at libertyclassicalschools.org. I'm Matthew Kirby, and we'll see you next time. Take care.